Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's get week 62 of today's Tolkien Times going with yet another Middle-earth Map Monday. Now, we're back to following in the footsteps of Frodo and friends here on Middle-earth Map Monday, and I'm all out of alliteration now. After stops in the Shire and Bree last series, we stopped for some history in Eregion and arrive at the famed Valley of Rivendell only last week. But it's such a magical place with such a storied history that we only had time to look at the geography of the valley and its importance in the Second Age. Today, we'll look at the role that it played in the history of the Third Age. And to start, we go back to the very early days of the Third Age after the fall of Sauron, when Isildur left Gondor to take up his father's realm in the north. In the Disaster of the Gladden Fields, we read, "When he at last felt free to return to his own realm, he was in haste, and he wished to go first to Imladris, for he had left his wife and youngest son there, and he had, moreover, an urgent need for the Counsel of Elrond." His youngest son was, of course, Valandil, who would become the third king of Arnor. In Appendix A in the Northern Line, there's a footnote for Valandil that tells us he was the fourth son of Isildur, born in Imladris. And in fact, Elrond himself says something that strongly suggests this in the Counsel of Elrond when he explains why Gondor didn't learn about the fate of the One Ring. "Small wonder is it that you have not heard them, Boromir. From the ruin of the Gladden Fields where Isildur perished, 3 men only came ever back over the mountains after long wandering. One of these was Oktar, the esquire of Isildur, who bore the shards of the sword of Elendil, and he brought them to Valandil, the heir of Isildur, who, being but a child, had remained here in Rivendell." Now, that all makes sense when we learn in the Heirs of Elendil and the Peoples of Middle-earth that Valandil was born in Second Age 3430, the very year that the last alliance was formed. So in that time that we talked about last week when they halted for a while at Imladris, it is said that the host that was there assembled was fairer and more splendid in arms than any that has since been seen in Middle-earth. Well, Valandil was born, the fourth and last of Isildur's sons. His other 3 sons, Elendur, Aratan, and Cirion, were killed in the Disaster of the Gladden Fields. Now, that housing of Valandil alone would be a significant impact on the history of the Third Age, but there is a lot more. The shards of Narsil came to Rivendell after the Gladden Fields, as Elrond told us. And in Of the Rings of Power in the Third Age in the Silmarillion, we learned that the blade was broken, and its light was extinguished, and it was not forged anew. And Master Elrond foretold that this would not be done until the ruling ring should be found again, and Sauron should return. More than that, while the Dunedain of the North dwindled, in Imladris, in the House of Elrond, their ancestry was not forgotten, and the line of the heirs of Isildur from father to son remained unbroken, Rivendell playing a huge role here in maintaining the line of Elendil in the north. Now, we also read in Of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, or Otrapata as I like to call it, that after the fall of Gil-galad, Master Elrond abode in Imladris, and he gathered there many elves and other folk of wisdom and power from among all the kindreds of Middle-earth. And he preserved through many lives of men the memory of all that had been fair. And the House of Elrond was a refuge for the weary and the oppressed, and a treasury of good counsel and wise lore. In that house were harbored the heirs of Isildur in childhood and old age because of the kinship of their blood with Elrond himself, and because he knew in his wisdom that one should come of their line to whom a great part was appointed in the last deeds of that age. And until that time came, the shards of Elendil's sword were given into the keeping of Elrond, when the days of the Dunedain darkened, and they became a wandering people. Rivendell, then, was several things in the Third Age, a refuge for elves and others, a treasury of wisdom, lore, and artifacts, and a harbor for the heirs of Isildur, even after the end of the North Kingdom, when Arthedain, the last of the 3 remnant kingdoms of Arnor, finally fell, when the line of the kings was continued by the chieftains of the Dunedain, of whom Aranarth, son of Arvedui, was the first. Arahail, his son, was fostered in Rivendell, and so were all the sons of the chieftains after him. Now, sometime in the middle of all this, between Third Age 1356 and 1409, during the war between Arnor and Angmar, Rivendell was besieged. But in 1409, Elrond's elves were joined by those of the Lindon, as well as the Galadhrim, broke the siege and helped subdue Angmar, providing peace for a while. Now, amongst the lore kept there in Imladris were documents that survived the fall of Numenor, as we read in Unfinished Tales a description of the island of Numenor. These represent indeed but a small part of all that was once written, for many natural histories and geographies were composed by learned men in Numenor, but these, like nearly all else of the arts and sciences of Numenor at its high tide, disappeared in the downfall. Even such documents as were preserved in Gondor or in Imladris, where in the care of Elrond were deposited the surviving treasures of the northern Numenorian kings, suffered from loss and destruction by neglect. Now, the artifacts kept safe in Rivendell weren't limited to just the shards of Narsil. In Appendix A13 on the North Kingdom, we read that after the death of Arvedwi, last king, that it wasn't just the chieftains of the Dunedain that were fostered in Rivendell, and there also were kept the heirlooms of their house, the Ring of Barahir, the shards of Narsil, the Star of Elendil, and the Scepter of Enumenos. Now, each of those could be an episode on its own, maybe a series of Middle-earth Relic Mondays. But I will say that the Star of Elendil kept in Rivendell was not the original Elendilmere. But that's an episode for another day. For now, folks, that wraps it up for Middle-earth Map Monday. Now, if you have a mailbag question that you'd like me to answer in Series 9 or ideas for more Middle-earth Map Monday locations, please email them to barliman@theprancingponypodcast.com. Be sure to let Barliman know it's for today's Tolkien Times. I'll get to it as soon as possible, with priority going to supporters of the show on Patreon. I am grateful for the support of my patrons. They're the ones who make it possible for me to invest the time and resources into producing these episodes. So if you'd like to be a part of that support, please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to find out how you can join the TTT Content Council, get a bonus episode every week, and more. Join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Tolkien Tuesday as we learn more about the professor himself. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you know the drill. Please like and subscribe. Follow or subscribe in your podcast apps, and follow @Tolkien Times on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.